Hello, my name is Andres Cuervo, and this is Beyond the Scenes, where I have conversations with friends, people that are in the film industry or creatives, and we talk about their lives and more beyond what they do. And today I have the visit of one of my friends here at the studio, another female representative of the film industry, Elizabeth Gottshall.
Yes.
And thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So, Liz, we've worked before in different projects, and one thing that really always stand out to me is that you're great as a professional, very zen when it comes to focusing. It was like second nature to you, almost as it feels like you were made to be a filmmaker. And that's something that I admire from you and the way you take challenges. And to start with, just tell me a little bit about your background. One of the times we met, we had a conversation about adoption and how you came from China. And it's interesting to me because I've been to China myself. And just to know a little bit about that and how you came to the United States, I think it's something that not very people are familiar with it. So.
Yeah. So China had the one-child policy. And about, I believe, 2015, they changed it to the two-child policy.
Mm.
But when I was born, it was the one-child policy. And so there was a preference for baby boys. And so if you wanted to have a second child, you would have to pay a fine. And if they had a baby girl, they would either just want to try for a baby boy, or if they wanted a second child, I guess they didn't want to keep a baby girl, they would want to have another baby boy. And a lot of that came from wanting to carry on the family name, but then also having someone to take care of the parents when they got older.
Yeah.
So I'm from the Guangdong Province, which is South
In the
China.
south, yeah. Border with Vietnam.
Yes.
Yes, I've been to.
So people think of Vietnamese a lot.
Yeah.
I believe I'm from the city Zhangjiang,
Okay.
which is a bigger city.
Yeah, I've been to Nanning and Kunming, same province.
And so I was told that I was left at a park and then taken to an orphanage. So left at a park early in the morning and then taken to an orphanage. And I was adopted in 1998 by my mother, single parent. And I was brought to Macon, Georgia. So not that far from where we are.
Yeah.
And I grew up in Macon, Georgia. And then I was raised there. I went to school there for high school, all through school, like elementary school, middle school, high school. And then in college, I went to Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. I knew several girls who were adopted in Macon, Georgia, mainly through my mother because she had friends who were also adopting.
They use the same agency?
I think so. A couple. But one of them she's in New York and they met on that same trip, but then some were not from it. And I don't know how they met. I don't know how people met pre-internet.
But how old were you when you were adopted here in the
So I was almost 2.
Almost 2.
I was almost 2, so I was technically a little bit older for being adopted because a lot of parents wanted like really young, fresh babies.
Yeah. But you do not remember anything from being a baby in China?
Nope. I was told, I knew like a few words in Chinese and ate kanji, but I didn't really know anything about China. I've seen some home videos.
Oh, yeah.
But the only other people that I knew that were Asian came from Asian families, or they were also adopted by predominantly white families. In college, I met more people who were adopted from China. So my freshman year roommate was adopted. I met another girl another person from Miami who was adopted, and then a few other people, which was really cool to talk to them and hear different perspectives from them about it.
And what I'm interested to know, what kind of challenges did you have growing up as Asian and being adopted? I'm guessing it's very different when your entire family is Asian and people realize, but when it's very evident
it is
that your mother is not your biological mother, correct?
Yes. So being adopted by a white family is going to be really different because culturally you are severed from your birth culture from China. So I don't know anything about any of the customs or the language or anything or the food. I know all that because of my own research and looking it up. And my mom did show me some things, or like we did some lesson lessons for the language, for Mandarin, and things like that when you're younger. But you're not fully absorbed in it. You're not. Yeah, you're not.
It's not native to you.
It's not native. So you basically kind of grow up like in a white culture.
Yeah, very Americanized.
Very Americanized. You're it's kind of like being a white person.
Yeah.
And it's not like being with a fully Asian family, and having that, like having parents, even if they're maybe a little bit more Americanized, they still have maybe grandparents that talk to them in the language, or they still think about the food.
They do celebrations that are part of their culture.
And celebrations that they still do. And even if you have someone who's half Asian and half maybe white or maybe another race, they still have a connection. Even though they're a little bit more caught in between two worlds too. Someone who's also born to an Asian family but is born here, you're still caught in between worlds, but they still have access usually to that culture and to family. And mine's just like totally.
Did you ever go back to China to visit or?
I have not yet, but I would like to. I'd like to do the whole search for birth parents. I did 23andMe and Ancestry. And you can go through, there are different ways you can do it. And there are different little nonprofit agencies that you can go through that are supposed to help you. But you would take like your raw DNA data from 23andMe, upload it to GED match. And you would hope maybe there's a match, and they send kits out to the people that have a match just to double check. So that's one way to do it. And then there's an agency, I think, that would make posters that would have like your baby photo and go, did you see this kid? Have you seen this baby?
Yeah.
They were left in this place in like 1996 or whatever year. There's a documentary on Netflix that's really great. It's called Found. And it's about three Asian girls who did DNA tests, and they all found out they were related. They were cousins.
Wow.
And they wanted to go back to China. Two girls wanted to find their biological parents. One did not want to find her biological parents, but wanted to see the orphanage that she came from and the caretaker that she had when she was there. So I would like to do my own journey with that. When I did 23andMe and Ancestry.com, I did find two cousins. One girl was like a second cousin, so it wasn't not a very high percentage of being related, but it was higher than the 1% or the 0.5% that they all said. I think it was about 5%. And then I found another girl who was from the same province, same city, and she was 10% related, which I don't know if that's, a
little closer.
But it is closer than the 5% is closer than the 1% that they're like, they might be a fourth or fifth cousin. And it says she might be a first cousin, maybe a second, but first or second is a lot closer. And I reached out to her and talked to her, and it turns out that she lived in Atlanta.
Wow.
Yeah. So I actually ended up meeting up with her and talking with her, and it was really fun and exciting to meet her and realize it and seeing how her life was and my life growing up was. And it turns out she was really not that far from me, and we'd actually moved to Atlanta around the same time, around the same year. And we didn't know for years, and now we have a relationship, like a friendship, and we try and meet every now and then and catch up. And
that's cool.
And
I can't imagine how different it will be, not only to grow in a different culture than what you were supposed to, but also I bet she's very different from relating to other Asian Americans that have a different background, a different story. It's almost like earlier I was sharing with you, sometimes I feel like I am Colombian, but when I'm in Colombia, I don't feel totally Colombian. And when I'm in the States, I don't feel like totally here. So it's that rare limbo. Sometimes it's a challenge, but other times it opens you up to appreciate things from different cultures. And it's almost like a citizen of the world, kind of. How do you see that difference from, relating and interacting with other people with a different, maybe the same ethnic background, but a totally different upbringing?
It is hard sometimes to interact with other people who are Asian, who are either like first generation or half white, half Asian, because I think they assume that I know certain things and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit of a learning curve sometimes when they have to explain things to me. And sometimes for some reason it feels embarrassing to not know. It just kind of feels like, oh, I should know. Like, I should have taken more initiative to find that out.
Okay.
And I would never blame my parent for not showing that to me. Like, she did make sure I knew where I was from and everything like that. And there's just some things you just can't teach. You kind of just have to learn yourself, or like take a class or do your own deep dive research kind of thing. So I really went through a lot more of thinking about that in college when I met more people, being exposed to more perspectives and more people from different cultures and everything like that. So I had to really work on it a little bit more, because when I was in high school, that's just not something I thought about, my identity. So I didn't really think about it more until college, and I met more people that weren't just like in the little circle of Georgia. And I met adoptees from different states and everything.
Do you think that the story of adoption, or in particular your ethnic identity, in some way has affected, positive or negative, your art, your career, the way you do things?
The Asian adoptee story is not really talked about in media. I've only seen like a couple things that kind of talk about it or show it and portray it.
Even though there's an entire generation.
Yeah,
that
there is a huge generation. Yeah, it's one thing, but I feel like it's just kind of like part of the lore, part of the backstory for me. It's something I do want to explore in a story to write, but it's not, I don't think it ever came up in like my studio artwork. It never came up in like my drawings or anything like that. I think there were other things I focused on about like mental health or like sexual orientation or just being a woman. More so than thinking about being an Asian adoptee or Asian American.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because they were just kind of parts of me. But I thought there were some other things that I wanted to explore about like emotions and the mind and relationships and things like that.
Yeah, I always wondered, because for some people, their upbringing definitely determines a lot of what they do later on in life. In your case in particular, I mean, your mom, what I understand is that she was already involved in media and also a professor in film and media studies. And I would think, oh, of course, this is going to be also a filmmaker, because that's the influence of your mom, and that's what you grew up in, and that's what was for you, that factor that paved the way for you to get into media.
I would watch movies with my mom, and she would tell me a little bit about her job, but I didn't consider it that much to be a huge influence. I can see a little bit of the influence now, but when I was first starting out, I didn't really consider it as much of an influence, I guess. I always really liked just art and writing, because I really like to read, and I always thought, oh, it'd be so great to like write the next big novel, kind of a thing. I think a lot of people had that. My best friend from middle school wanted to write a novel, and we were big readers. And I was like, oh, I never thought about just doing that. And so I always really liked that, and I always really liked studio art and just drawing. For when I was younger, I just never really expressed my emotions just verbally. So the best way to do it for me was just through art and drawing or writing and just like pretending to be another character. But acting was never really a thing for me as an outlet. I did not like being in front of the camera. I was always a behind the camera kind of person. So just as I continued to get older and continued doing just my own writing, but then doing studio art much more seriously with drawing, printmaking, painting, and photography. As those got more serious, I was just thinking more, what do I want to do? What do I want to study in school? And I never really actually thought about film as a career option in high school. I remember when I was younger, I wanted my first DSLR to try photography. And my mom was like, do you want one with video capabilities? I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I just want to do like photos. And I did that. And then later on, as I was just thinking about what I wanted to do in the classes I might want to take in college, I took my mom's DSLR, which had video capabilities, and started using that. And she said, you should have gotten your DSLR with video capabilities because I didn't know you would want to do this. I said, I didn't know either.
Yeah.
So when I went to college, you have a lot of more opportunity to obviously explore other classes, so you don't have to do just the ones for your major, and that was really nice. That's why I picked my school, was I had a little bit more freedom to do that. And so I wanted to take a film studies course at the college and not do it like the way my mom was teaching it. Like, I don't know if that makes sense.
That very formal.
I wanted to explore on my own.
Okay.
I wanted to explore film on my own, not just through what my mom was telling me or some of the books that she had. I wanted to have like a structured class and someone else teaching it to me. Plus, that was all the way in Massachusetts. Okay. I didn't want to go to college in my town or the school that she worked at, which she encouraged. She encouraged me to leave, so she was not upset about that. She said, you should go off and go to a different state or go wherever you want, and this is the best time to do it, because when else are you going to have that opportunity? So I wanted to do a film studies course. I just did an intro course, and I really liked what I learned. And I'd always really loved movies when I was younger. I always loved storytelling. I loved going to the movies. I love the way you feel when you walk out of a theater, and you're just kind of like in awe or thinking about it, or I like kind of imagining, like, what if you were that main character or something like that? What would you do in that situation? Or if I saw a bad one, I'm like, you could have just done this to change the movie ending. So it all really, I didn't realize how film kind of just combined all my interests of studio art and writing and storytelling. But I always kind of known I loved them separately. And so when I did the film studies course, I really liked it, and I really liked what we talked about and what we explored. And I just continued taking classes. And I did a film theory course. I did an intro to video production because I was curious about just being hands-on and doing that. And then an advanced video production course. I ended up I just really liked those, and it felt like a very natural pipeline to combine my love of storytelling and studio art and photography into film.
But before that, you also pursue another type of career.
Yes. So when I went to college, I went to Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. It's a small liberal arts college. It's a women's college, one of the Seven Sisters. And I did not initially know I was going to do film, so I never thought about doing a film school. So I never looked at like Full Sail or looked at AFI or any of those kinds of big film institutions. So I always knew I wanted to do studio art. That was the one thing I looked at for school. And then I thought I was going to do biology. Like, I thought maybe I'd do some sort of science. So I thought I'd do biology into like forensics.
Wow.
Because I was very absorbed into the crime procedural shows.
Wow.
I love those. And then I ended up switching to computer science because I thought of it as a backup career.
Okay.
In a sense. And I was like, oh, what if I just got into tech or got into coding? I always really liked computers. I did like a little light web coding when I was in high school. So I thought maybe I'll do computer science. And then I did all these film courses. And then I just thought, oh, I actually want to do film. And whenever I thought about film and did some research, film is one of those industries that's fairly easy to switch to without needing to go to school for it. So that was kind of nice to get an experience in a different area. So I'm still very happy that I did computer science, because people will ask me, do you wish you did film school? I'm like, no, not really.
Okay.
Kind of like being able to have another experience and another piece of knowledge about something that other people don't know maybe as much about. My knowledge might be a little outdated now, though, because it's been a few years.
Yeah.
But it was nice to just have those other experiences and other ways to learn about myself, or other ways to express myself that aren't so rigid as maybe whatever film conventions are. Because even though there are no rules in film, there's still, generally speaking, ways that film things are done. So it's kind of nice to explore art as studio art and just kind of learn how to express what I want to say in my art, and try different things and weird things, get kind of weird with it and really think about composition and color in a way that that's different from film. And I think that helps add to my art and work in the film world. So I think it's always really good for anyone to have other life experiences than just film. I think you do kind of limit yourself if you only do film. That's one of the things I read was, don't immediately go to LA because you're going to be hustling so much that you won't be able to get all the life experiences you need or want to have to tell a really good story, because the only thing you'll know is hustling to get into film. So I think it's good to have other knowledge and life experiences and other connections that are not just in film. I think that's another big thing, is having people that are not only in film. So I have friends that are in the computer science world, or friends that are doing studio art, and she's an artist and she's in Greece, or a friend that did architecture, and learning a little bit more about some digital art making and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that all these experiences that we have are not necessarily branches that are taking us out of our goal, which is filmmaking, but are actually complementing and paving the way for us to be who we are today and what type of things we do today.
Yeah.
And they kind of influence, especially when you're coming from the arts and in studio art and performance and painting and drawing and things that, as you said, are going to complement the way you see things and the way you think as well. Because otherwise we'll be like tripods holding a camera. But we are creatives that happen to work with these tools as well.
Absolutely. I think that is a really good way to explain it. I think that everything that I've learned kind of just builds on. They're just really good building blocks for me. I don't really use computer science as much now. Like, I don't do my own coding. I'm not as familiar with the tech world because in between, after I did an internship in New York, I really just went just for film.
Yeah.
And working in like media and TV and stuff like that. But I think that even just doing computer science, I enjoyed learning about it at the time. And I made a lot of great friends that way. But just kind of practicing learning how to do problem solving, because you have to do a lot of problem solving in computer science when you're just doing coding. So there's a lot of problem solving. There's a lot of experimentation and having to figure out, like, your thought process is totally different there.
Yeah.
Just trying to figure out algorithms and codes.
Yeah. I think your mindset, it's set on a different place when you have that contact. And if you think about it, cameras today are just computer brains with a sensor that gathers light, as opposed to film cameras that might have electronics and mechanical things, but they're not computers. They don't have software. They don't have an OS running inside the camera. And I think that now you're living in an age where the two passions and the two experiences that you have are kind of perfectly merging, to the point that if you see a phone today, it's actually a tiny computer that people use to even make movies and make media as well. So it's interesting to know that maybe looking at a camera, looking at a menu, it becomes more intuitive to you when you already have that experience and you're close to that.
Yeah, I think definitely having a little bit of technology knowledge does help with just kind of figuring out where to go and navigate a camera and everything.
Yeah, at the same time, it's not in school that you really develop the skills as opposed to working with the cameras, the different, and part of, for you working in the camera department is being aware of the new technologies that are coming up, and maybe not saying, oh, I've never worked with that camera. It's like, okay, let me see how it is, and very intuitively come and understanding the camera.
Definitely.
So how do you transition to go completely into filmmaking?
I graduated, I didn't really know what I was going to do and how to get into film, other than someone telling me you should just go in PA.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay.
After all that study and everything, just go be a bit.
Because, the people I talked to didn't really know. We were in Massachusetts. We were in South Hadley, Massachusetts, which is rural Massachusetts in the Pioneer Valley, 2 hours west of Boston. So no one really knew what to do. My aunt did some acting, but she was an actor. That's different. So I never invested any time to try and do computer science because I knew it. So I never did any internships for computer science. I never went to the Grace Hopper conference or anything like that to try and even attempt a path that way. And studio art is, you basically kind of do a residency or just be an artist. There's not the same kind of, you just join a company and you work your way up as a studio artist. And so when I was near graduation, I was like, I don't know what to do. I was told there's a big film industry in Atlanta, which is not that far from Macon.
Go back to your home.
I was like, wait, yeah, go back home. And my mom was helping me, and she found something called the Georgia Film Academy, which they host at then Pinewood, but now Trellis Studios. And even though I did video production courses at school and I did a little internship, you don't know how to be on a union set. You learn like 3-point lighting, this is what an f-stop is, but you don't really know how does a union set work on a big thing. Because I'd only ever worked on like little shoots at school where there were 3 of us. You're running sound and camera and lighting. And you have your friend doing things, maybe like holding a light. So you didn't really know what it was like to be on a crew. You didn't really know what it was like to be on a full union set. And at the Georgia Film Academy, they had you do an intro class, other little craft courses like grip or lighting or editing or something. And then they had an internship you could do. And I always knew I wanted to do camera because I loved photography and I wanted to be in the camera department. I didn't know what I wanted to do in the camera department because I didn't know everything other than I thought I wanted to DP, be a director of photography and really think about the image and the look of a film project. Help create the aesthetic, work on the composition, make these really beautiful shots. Because that was a big thing that I really loved in a lot of TV shows or films, and I didn't really realize it at the time. So I did the Georgia Film Academy, met a lot of great people. I'm still friends with a lot of them today. Did an intro course, did a lighting course, did an editing course, got an internship in the camera department, which was great, and learned then how to be on set and be in the camera department because there aren't any other classes really for camera department, so it's really hard to get into. And so I did that internship, talked to a lot of people, made connections, asked them like, what should I do? How do I get in? Like, how do I get to where you are? And learn about the union. And so they told me, and I started working at a rental house, started day playing on different things, just like little short films, these little Lifetime movies, indie features, things like that. Learned what it meant to pull focus, learned what it meant to be a second AC, did other little projects for other people just for free or for really low pay, just to figure out how to do it and make connections and learn. And so I did all that. Obviously there was a little gap year for COVID, but that was basically the path. And then once I was more comfortable and met more people at the rental house that I worked at, I talked to people that said, oh, if you let us know when you join the union and we'll hire you as a digital utility, which is the entry-level position basically for the camera department in a big union set. So I joined the union in November 2021 and started getting some work that way through the connections that I'd met at the preps that I went to or people I met at the rental house and things like that. And after that, I started working more and you just kind of build your connections. The networking was really important because I always kind of scoffed at the idea when people said, oh, you just got to network. And I was like, that's what I'm hearing from everyone. Everyone would just say, you just got to network. It's about who you know. Yeah. And then as I've gotten older and all your jobs come from all these people that you've met or worked with in the past, or someone else hears your name from someone they've worked with that they really trust. And they go, okay, if they really like Liz, then let's have her on.
Even more than your educational background. Like, I've never been asked, hey, can you give me your credentials or what's your title or what school did you go to?
Yeah.
There are other things that speak louder when it comes to your career and how you develop as a professional in this industry.
Definitely. I thought about during COVID, I had a little panic and I was like, maybe I should go back to school. But by then I'd already been on set a bunch and one person told me, you know what you need on the set. I mean, there's maybe some benefits to coming to film school for certain people, but for me, they said, you've already been on set. You're going to be so bored because a lot of, especially graduate film programs are for people that didn't do film. So they have a lot of entry-level courses and introduction courses where they are teaching people how to be on a set too. And so for me, it was more important to prioritize real life experience. And no one ever asked me, what was your background? If they did, it was out of just pure interest and wondering how I got there. It was never, hey, you have a computer science background? Like, that's not going to help us on a film set. And then you find out there's so many other people in film that either joined film late in life or they did something totally different before that and found film, or this film is their second career and things like that. So it's really kind of amazing to see that everyone has their own path in their film. And they all have their own life experiences, so it's always so interesting to meet those different people. Because one of the big things about computer science that I didn't want to do is I didn't want to be in an office staring at a computer screen. I do sometimes stare at a smaller screen and then maybe a bigger screen, but I'm not. Just the idea of sitting in an office 9 to 5 coding and then just talking about coding and programs and software and all that. That idea of just being static was not very interesting to me. I like the idea that film was, you're doing something similar every day, but you are doing something different every day. And I really love seeing the final projects. When I did my own little shorts, I think the most exciting thing was seeing the final project and going, I made that. Even if it's bad, you're just like, I finished that. Because making a film is not easy. You have to be really in for it, in for the long haul to complete a film. And I was doing a bunch of little workshops during the pandemic, and one of Alice Wu said, no one playing it safe is going to be making a film. And I think that's very true. And I was like, you know what, you're right. I don't want to play it safe all the time. And I ended up joining the film industry. It's not a safe and stable career necessarily, but I do love it. And I do love doing something different every day. I do love meeting all these different people. And I love working on other people's projects and seeing how they look at the world and what stories they want to tell, what's important to them. Or someone is from a different culture and how it's so different, and maybe how they straddle the line of being like American or maybe like Colombian like you. So hearing from you and your experience is so different versus my experience. You never knew anyone really who was Chinese and adopted. I met someone else who was Colombian and adopted. So we had similar experiences, but they were still a little different. So I think meeting people was a big thing.
To me, it's remarkable how difficult films can be behind, what we see in the screen. You go to the movies, and then at the end of the movies, you see this entire list that takes minutes and minutes to go. And what you don't realize is that's what makes these 2 hours that you just watch possible. A lot of teamwork, and like you said, filmmaking is hard. It doesn't only it's hard physically and takes a toll on that, but also mentally and emotionally. And to me, every department has its own challenges, but particularly the camera department is very demanding, because that's what's captured in the film, and the responsibilities that you have in there that can make or break, the film. How do you find ways to cope with those pressures? Look for outlets where you can, focus your energy in a positive way.
Right. For me, it's going back to studio art. Going back to drawing or painting. I would just have a friend over and we would just paint together. And it wasn't, it didn't have to be anything serious. We were just painting pictures of flowers or of a bear, or painting shoes, because we were like, let's make it look like a galaxy on their shoes. So it's just doing fun little projects like that, and cooking together. I really like to cook, and finding new recipes. And so sometimes we would cook together like little calzones or a stir fry. Doing those 2 things, especially with friends, was really good. And couldn't see a lot of friends during the pandemic, but I had one really, really good friend who's my childhood best friend, and we see each other constantly. Spending time with them is really important for me. Not just talking about film stuff. Sometimes just casually talking about movies or TV. So not in the sense of
dissecting the scenes and the colors.
I go into films, people are like, oh, I don't know, I don't really know if it looks like a good film. I go in for entertainment. There's certain films, yes, you do go in for really thought-provoking, beautiful imagery. And sometimes I just want to see cars blowing up, So I think like once you make that separation in your head between like a film and a movie,
Okay.
even then some just are entertaining ones that don't seem like they have a lot. Those can be really impactful. They can be really great, and those can be really exciting, and they get people talking.
Yeah.
So just, watching TV shows or movies and chatting about them, just the story. Just enjoying the story or talking about books that we've read.
Mm-hmm.
And just having those kinds of outlets is really nice. Just to talk to people that are not in film necessarily.
Yeah.
I think it's important to be well-rounded, not just have your community be only film people. So I think it's good for me to have people that are involved with other things or doing activities like rock climbing or racquetball. I started like collecting flowers and pressing them and turning them into art, doing something like that, or going back to things that are not film, or like staying active, like going on walks and finding new music. I think just taking a step back is good, because especially you don't want to fall into burnout.
Okay.
I've had people that they just keep going and going and going, and if you feel burnt out, it's already too late, kind of a thing. So you want to mitigate any kind of burnout before, especially if you're on a big show.
Yeah.
If you're working almost 80 hours a week, it's hard to recover from.
And is that healthy, right? Like, we're not wired.
No, we shouldn't be working.
That's when your passion and something that is unique to you becomes a burden, and that's not good.
Yeah, if you're so burnt out from working 80 hours a week, which is double the work week that people usually have, which is already a little too much sometimes. Yeah. The weekend, you don't have time to recover. You can't. It's hard. It was hard to get out of bed if I was on a really big show. Like your Saturday's kind of gone because you're just recovering. You're so tired. And then Sunday, you're trying to do everything that you didn't do on Saturday. And then you still have to go to bed early to wake up early on Monday. Mm-hmm. So I think it's one of the best things was, again, talking with my friend, and they would say, if you're too tired to go out, let me just come over and we'll just get Chinese takeout and sit and watch a movie. I said, that is perfect. And that's kind of just all you need. Doing that, or just doing some drawing, just peaceful.
That's interesting, because there's a whole mentality in this new era of content creators where your value comes from hustling and how much you can demonstrate that you hustled to get to a point, Yeah. And if you don't show on social media you're hustling and you're working, then you're really not successful. And what you're saying is like taking a step back, taking time for yourself to recover is just as valuable, basically, as that many projects and hustle that you do. Choosing the camera department is not something that a lot of females in filmmaker necessarily go to, although in the later years I've seen a lot of women in film, especially in the camera department. I was used to more on like production, PAs, producers, even directors, but not necessarily as much in camera. How was your experience being a female in the camera department?
So I'm going to start with a little history lesson. I don't know if you want to hear it, but
go ahead.
Film, when it first started, all the first filmmakers were women. Late 1800s, early 1900s. The first one was Alice Guy Blanchet, arguably the first filmmaker, not just first female filmmaker, first filmmaker. She was the first woman that was actually adding story to film, not just making a train driving through, just doing, just setting up a camera and just looking at.
It was at the beginning. It was like experiments of how to capture images.
It was an experiment,
but it was that storytelling aspect.
So she was like, "How do I incorporate actually telling a story?" She would have it about being like a woman, or just something that's a little bit more funny, or being a mother and a wife. So she actually incorporated that. She incorporated sound into her films. It was a little bit more like a music video where they would already record the sound separately, and then they would play it back, and the actors would
as they're playing.
They would like lip sync to it, and then you would play it. She experimented with color, which was not necessarily color film, but coloring onto the film itself. So she did a lot of work with that, and that was in France. A lot of women were directors, or they were writing the scripts and they were shooting. Dorothy Arzer came up with what we know today as the boom pole mic. And then once men discovered that they could start making a profit on film and movies, they kind of pushed all the women out. So I think people forget that piece of history.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't think
now.
I don't think it's just that people forget. It's like people don't know.
Yeah,
It's not
told.
Yeah,
Because they're learning about a lot of early filmmakers being men.
yeah. In a lot of the studio era that was very dominated by males, but even Lumiere's assistant and wife was also an accomplished filmmaker. It's just that he's not talked about
Yeah.
from that perspective.
So no one talks about it. So I think that's important to just know when we're talking about women in the camera department now.
Okay.
And the camera department there are more women that are coming in it, which is great. And I've met way more women than I would say some of the women I've talked to. They said, you did not really see any women in the camera department. So it is still very male dominated, which is tough. It is hard because you feel a little out of place and you can't be intimidated. You do have to stand your ground and say, like, some of these things are not okay. Sometimes they'll, like, share jokes and things. You're like, you shouldn't be talking about that. Like, it's 2024, you know? So it was definitely, so when I went in, I was very optimistic, as you should be. And I still am very optimistic about the way things are headed, because things are changing. But it was hard to realize the actual disparity between who's being hired.
And that is just one way at looking at this diverse pool of people that are behind the filmmaking industry. But another way that I've seen you advocating for diversity in a very particular way, it's also who's telling the stories and who is the voice. And although at the beginning we talk about that sometimes it feels weird saying, oh, I have the voice of an Asian American, although I'm not fully Asian, I'm not fully American, but you still have a voice for the people that you represent. And I'm interested to know what's your take on that.
I do definitely still want to explore the Asian adoptee experience, because it is such a large community that people don't realize. We're one of the largest international adoptee groups.
Yes.
And just people get very confused when they see my last name and they're like, oh, that's a white last name. Are you half? And that never crosses their mind that I'm adopted. It never crosses their mind. They're very confused and they never think about that. So I would like to explore that, because I think the only times I've ever really seen someone who was adopted from Eastern Asian country is Modern Family, when they had Cam and Mitch had Lily, but there were only a couple episodes they got into it about her, but they never ever explored Lily's actual point of view of what is it like growing up in a predominantly white family and her being Vietnamese. I think one of my friends said, and I've never seen it, but my friend said that she related a lot more to Kung Fu Panda 3 and the adoption storyline there, where there is a panda and his dad is a goose. Wow. Which I watched the first two, but the third one's supposed to go really actually into him finding his biological family. And she said I related more to that than I ever did to Lion with Dev Patel, where he was an Indian boy who was adopted by a white family. Even when I recently watched Joyride, there were some things that they really got right that I felt, but the storyline itself of the adoption story ended very nicely wrapped up in a bow, which is not necessarily the story for many, many people. But it was nice to see the representation and this woman who had a Chinese American friend who was like from a Chinese family. They had a Chinese restaurant. They spoke Chinese. She knew some of the customs and everything, and how different she felt from her best friend who was Chinese versus her. And she's like, I don't know what any of that means. I don't know. And there's this one great scene where she was in the airport in China, and she said, it's kind of amazing where I just look Chinese. I look like everyone else. And the woman, her best friend who was Chinese, said, no, even then we could still tell that you're different. And I haven't experienced that, so I can't say for sure, but I feel like I do feel that even just like sometimes if I'm with a group of Asian people, they're not like straight up, they're not mean about it or anything. but it is something that feels different, maybe the way they dress or the things that they talk about, or like if they talk about certain foods or like certain like animes or like K-dramas and stuff.
And there are even mannerisms that you pick from the culture that you're in that are completely different.
Yeah.
You know?
So there's still a huge disparity, like a huge gap in that. Because I do see a lot of Asian stories that are being told in movies. Not as many as there should be. But I have seen them, but they are still very much about the Asian American experience or just the Asian experience. It's never the Asian adoptee.
Yeah.
So even though I'm so happy that those are being created, and I'm so happy that they're going places, but I just can't relate. So I would like to make something that more people can relate to. I've met some more Asian adoptees here in Atlanta, and we have like a little group, and we try to see each other every other month and stuff. So it's really great talking with them and seeing that our experiences are very similar, and I've never felt quite as at home with like a group of Asian people as I have with them, because they understand, they get it. Because other people just don't get it. I can explain it to them, and it's great. And I'm glad that they're interested in learning, but you just don't understand. Like, I won't fully understand what it's like to be Colombian, or what it's like to be going home to Colombia after you've been there 18 years and then leaving and then going back and then realizing you're not as fully Colombian as you were. Like, you don't feel that way. I have a friend who's half Korean, and then she said even though she's half Korean, she does not feel Asian enough. And for me, it's just, we talked about how we kind of have a similar idea of that, where it's like, I'm just not Chinese enough, kind of a thing. And she's not Korean enough. She feels a lot more in touch with like her American white side of the family. So we kind of had a weird similar thing, but like most of the time when I've met someone who's half Asian, they're still in touch with their half Asian side. So it's just kind of nice to find my own little community, but I'd really like to talk about that more and create something, I think, from the perspective of someone who is Asian American, because the person who wrote Joey Ride was not Asian adoptee. They were not an Asian adoptee. And it was great though that they were Asian in general, but having someone who's an Asian adoptee, even the actress who was playing the Asian adoptee was not actually adopted. It's such a specific experience. But I would like to, just continue writing my own stories more that are focused on women, that are focused on like sexual orientation and queerness and the LGBTQ community, and just intersectionality of feminism and everything like that. I think those are really important, because that's still missing in the media. We talk about, there's all these great films that are really focused on like that are focused on women or like queer stories, but when you really think about it and how many things come out, how many stories are being released, they're still just not there.
And having representation doesn't necessarily means that the product is not going to be full of stereotypes.
Right. You can't. I think one of the other big things is they'll just have people in there to fill their diversity quota just to have it. Yeah. And they'll just do it just to do it. And I'm not saying you don't have to get super deep into the storyline of like family trauma or generational trauma, or like really far deep into like what's it like when they have a quinceañera or something like that. You don't have to, you don't have to get super far deep into that, because sometimes I think they'll just have it to have it, and then they'll throw in lines to like remind you this person is Colombian, this person is Chinese. And I think there are natural ways to include it and just not make it a big deal. I feel like they make it such a big deal. Like, you should have it, but they make it so in your face. Yeah. They don't feel necessarily genuine. It still feels like you're the butt of the joke. Sometimes, I think I've noticed. And some of that comes down to who's writing it and who's directing it and who's producing it. So I think that I feel like some of the jokes are a little bit less. A little bit. But I still think there's ways to go that doesn't fall into stereotypes. And it's not just about ethnicity. Okay. I think there's still poor jokes about just like women or like mental health or LGBTQ.
How do you use your platforms and the voice that you have to be consequent with the idea of promoting or bringing awareness to that issue and diversity? I know that sometimes you go online and you use that platform as part of your voice. What type of things are you doing to kind of be part of the solution of that?
Some of it's just going to the movies or just watching the show. A lot of movies just need ticket sales like at theaters. And if no one's showing up, so you'll sometimes see movies that didn't do well. And it's like, because no one went to the theater. So sometimes, and you can't just rely on streaming numbers. Like it's really weird now because now we are in the streaming. So the same kind of numbers and money is not there like there were in before when you had movies and DVD sales and VHS back in the day. Yeah. So you kind of just need to show up and just go, like a lot on like opening weekends or like when a TV show first premieres, start watching it on the opening weekend because a lot of these websites and companies are just looking to see what their numbers were when the show first debuts. And it's a little hard to just like time it out, but even just like going to the theater and just paying for a ticket helps. And just sharing it online and just going like, this is great. That's really important. And then I think just joining projects for people that want to share their story that is not your very stereotypical, like something that's a little bit more diverse. I think just joining in on those projects is good. Helping those people make their dream, because you'd hope that they would help you when you want to make your project. So even if they're like not high paying, I'm like, this is a great story and it needs to be said and it needs to be shared. So I want to help you make your story. And you never know where it's going to go, because it could go to a film festival and it could get picked up by someone, a producer, and they could make a feature, or they can make another film, and you know that they're going to make something that is also important to them in that same vein. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's not that specific story, but maybe they have another thing about being a woman or a mother that they want to share. So it's just supporting them, or like going, if you can go to like, I've gone to like little workshops or go to mixers, things like that. Just going to the theater. So I think is a big thing, because the movie industry is still so, it's going to be, because it's an industry, it's a business. Yep. It's money oriented. So you really need to just show up and just be there.
Yeah. And in the same token, it also supports the community that you're building around. And I see that building community has also been a quintessential part of your journey. You know, not only that you're meeting with other Chinese or Asian adoptees, but also the community that you're building around your industry. Yeah. And also being open to, it's almost like when you see that there's a little clique, you know, a group of people. Yes. Because that's very persistent in our industry. It's like cliques, and you move like with this little group to the next project with this little group. And I feel like the way you're approaching that, it's, if you see those cliques and you don't belong there, it's almost, I've seen you make like a bigger tent so you can embrace them as well. And so almost like you are creating community. And how is it for you to create a network and not just trying to fit into this cliques?
So I definitely make an effort on all my projects. If I'm the first AC and I'm allowed to have a second AC, or if I'm an operator, like you're allowed to have a first AC, I will really fight hard to have another woman or another woman of color who is on my set. I love working with my friend Angelica, because she really makes an effort to have women on her camera team. So even if they're small sets, it's such a difference having only women on your camera team. And what we did during the strike was, after these workshops that we were attending for camera stuff, we were getting lunch afterwards, and all these camera women would come together and we would have lunch, and then our group just kept growing. And it's so nice having this little community that we formed, because we go to each other about questions that we have about gear. If we're like, hey, I don't really know what's going on with my tear deck, it feels like a safe space to do it. It feels like a safe space to go, hey, is anyone free for this job? I know it's not high paying, but if I could get another woman out here that I know, that's really great. Or just figuring out who might have gear, or if they know someone, we need a woman who is a production coordinator. Does anyone know a woman a production coordinator? So not necessarily camera. And I think having that safe space with women is helpful. when I was in college and I was doing computer science. A magazine came in to do a piece on women doing computer science and STEM at a women's college versus doing at a co-ed college and how different it is. And one of the things that they found out is the women are much more comfortable learning about STEM and computer science in women's colleges because it's a safe space. You do not feel like you're being talked down to by any of your male classmates. You do not feel like you're asking a dumb question. You just feel more comfortable interacting with other people. And I think that's the same thing with the camera department and film industry. I've worked on a few film sets that were, for the most part, all women or non-binary people. And it feels like such a difference. And you don't notice it until you're there. And you just kind of go, this is so nice. This felt so safe. If you made a mistake, everyone was so understanding, or they go, yeah, you can totally have another take. That's totally fine. They totally got it. And it's still like a well-run set. It's very organized. Everyone's so detail-oriented, and they care so much about the project they're on and about you. And I think that's been really important to find in film industry, and like sitting together with women and non-binary people and finding that little circle and maintaining contact and see each other outside of film context. Let's go get a drink. Let's go to this festival, and let's go take a walk in a park. Just doing things like that. Let's go watch a movie. Let's go hang out by the pool. Let's go chat and get to know each other as people, and not just filmmakers. Let's be people together and be friends, and we support each other, and we talk about things we feel that are like, I don't know if the situation on this film set, if I handled it well. What are you saying? And they go, I think you did great, and just supporting each other about that. Or if they feeling uncomfortable about something, like, here's some things that you could do, or we can talk to this other person and see what they say. And so I think that's really been important, and that's really helped, because I didn't realize it until I was thinking about more recently with like my group of camera women, was how long it took to build the network. Because in the beginning, I was thinking, maybe I did choose the wrong industry. Maybe this isn't for me. The long hours were long. And then I had people that I connected with, but I didn't really have friends in the industry. So for a while, it's just like, I don't know if this is it. But now that I've become more immersed in it and figured out my own systems and preferences and how to work more efficiently and get more comfortable with gear, and now that I've made these more connections and actually had friend groups, and we all go do things together, that's made a huge difference in working in this industry. I'm like, this is where I'm actually supposed to be. This is much more comfortable. It's a little bit of a circus, but it's my circus.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I mean, like you said, you find these places where it's hard and you can give up, or you can be persistent. And also you have these circumstances and these environments that are toxic, that are not, and then you bring kindness, and that changes the atmosphere. So how do you see persistence and kindness as the key to your success?
The old crews, and we're predominantly men, they were really hard sets, and sometimes you just hear these kind of horror stories where people were not being treated well. There was, people are yelling at each other, or they're being physically awful to people, And I think that as that generation kind of retires and moves out, we can change the work environment. We can change the space. And I think it's just passing on any knowledge that I have to other people, or like, hey, if you want to chat, we can go sit down, have coffee, talk about it, or trying to bring people onto preps if I can, or hey, you won't get paid for this, but if you want to be the camera PA, they would totally be fine having you. And just passing that on and go, you should meet these people, and offering advice. And because that's how it worked out for me. It was someone was nice.
Yeah.
Someone was nice and said, oh, we'll sit down and we'll chat about this. Or I ask, hey, would you mind getting coffee for like an hour, and we can chat, and I have some questions. And they're totally fine with that. And I think that's just the biggest part of it is just pushing and sending it on, pass it on. Because you don't want to work in a place where people are mean and yelling at you. I know there might be times where it's a little tense, but you don't want to be in that environment. You don't want to be in like an abusive state. You're already working such hard hours and stuff. You don't want to be tense all the time. That's not good for you. You're going to be stressed. And that stress isn't good for you. It's going to wear you out. It's not good for your heart.
Yeah.
So I think that you really just have to keep going. And when you find that community, it's going to be it's going to be really helpful. And they'll help push you. They help support you. And then just the kindness. Yeah, that's so important to just be kind. There's some things like if you ask for something or ask for some advice, there's ways to say it and ways not to say it, You just go, oh, next time, I think you should do it this way instead of just going, that was so stupid, you shouldn't have done it that way, you should be doing it this way. That's such a difference. If you're just told, hey, I would just move the cart over there next time, it's just going to be a lot easier.
Yeah.
There's such different ways of just like tone and how you say things to people, and the information you pass on. They might think they're helping if they're just going like, you need to move the cart there. Just being kind and offering explanations, answering questions, staying in touch with people.
Yeah, it's like transitioning from the mentality of a gatekeeper that has secrets, and I know the secrets to the industry, to a gate opener that is willing to let other people come and be part of this industry that we love so much.
Yes, I think there is a big problem, especially some like the older generation of gatekeeping, and just like, no, we're all in the same boat. We all just want to work on these projects, and we're working on movies. Like, that's fun. That should be fun.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be stressed. We shouldn't be so high strung. We should be sharing the knowledge that we have. And I think that was what was great about having my community of camera non-men, camera women and non-binary people, is that no one's gatekeeping. Everyone's like, yeah, I'm totally down to help you. And they're offering advice, and they go, in my past experience, that didn't work out, or that did work out. I think that's really important.
That's cool. Now, what is in your horizon? What's coming up? Plans that you have? I know that we talked just a little bit about writing and maybe directing, which is something that it's not what you do all the time in your profession. But what's coming up in the future for Liz?
Okay. Short-term goals for camera. I'd like to continue doing more operating. I've done a lot of operating for commercial and corporate work, which I do enjoy, but I would like to try my hand at doing more narrative operating. Because I did some of my own like DPing and camera operating when I was in school, and that was fun. I enjoyed it, but you're thinking about so many other things. You can't fully focus on being the camera operator or the DP. So I'd really like to work for a DP and see what it's like working with a DP and doing camera operating, and being hands-on with the gear to work on this. And then maybe eventually go back to DPing, maybe, not entirely sure about that, but try that on some short films and things, and see how I like that. So that's short-term goals. Longer-term goals, I would like to do some of my own writing and directing. I'd like to try working on different genres to figure out what is my thing. Because I've done things that are a little bit more comedic, but then I've done things that are a little bit more serious. I'd like to try something that's a little bit more psychological and horror. I do have a script in mind that I've outlined, and I'd like to write and actually finish that and maybe shoot it, or maybe apply for some grants and shoot it, and actually finish a project now that I've collected so much knowledge from being on set and meeting so many people. Because the last short that I did, I really loved it. I'm very proud of it that I finished it and did this, and I had a crew. But it was the very first thing I did after getting out of all my continuing education courses. So now that I've collected all this knowledge of like watching directors and how they work, working more closely with actors and DPs, I feel like now my project's
another level.
It's another level, and I feel so much more confident in working with people and knowing what I want and just seeing other people work and observing. For me, I'm a visual learner. So watching it and observing it has been so helpful instead of just reading. Doing that and doing workshops and just chatting with people, it's been really helpful. So I'd like to make this short. I'd like to make a short that's actually a short, because the last short that I did was way too long to be a short. Technically it was, but I want to make something that I can actually be happy with, that I can send to festivals. They don't have to lead to anything like massive, but just the idea of going like, I have a film that was in a festival. I'd really like to make that, and I'd really like to focus on the story about Asian adoptees, but I have some more experiencing to do, I think, because I'd really like to go into the actual search of birth parents, but I'd like to actually experience it myself before I write it. So I've gotten some stuff down, but I know that I need to actually get through and experience it and see what it's like making the poster and looking and traveling to China before I get there. But that's a little bit further in the future, but I've already started the process because I got the 23andMe data and everything like that, and looked up different organizations for it, and talking to some of the other Asian adoptees that are in Atlanta has been helpful. And so that's a little bit further in the future, but slow baby steps.
Yeah.
But definitely working on camera operating in a narrative way, working on narrative projects, and then working on my short film, actually writing it, getting it on paper, and maybe thinking about directing and getting money and a crew and making it.
I know this is going to be one of those conversations that's going to inspire a lot of people. People are going to be identified with your story, your background, the things that you're doing now, and the things that you want to do in the future. So how can they get connected with you? Maybe reach out. Maybe somebody wants to be in contact with you. I know that you're very present in social media. So how can people find you?
I think the best way is probably through Instagram.
Yeah.
I have a website. You have the little link tree in the website.
Yeah.
And so it has all the links to find me. I mean, best way is probably going to be Instagram.
Okay.
And then the website, I think, has some further information.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot through our conversation, and I really love these opportunities that I have to, speak with my friends. Something that is not just technical stuff, not just camera stuff. So thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing with me. Thank you for also being open with some intimate things about your experience in your life. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's a great idea that you have this so we can learn about each other as people.
Yeah.
And not necessarily just filmmakers or just cogs in the machine. We're all human. We all have our own stories. And I think it's great to share it. And it's great to learn more about you, too.
Thank you. And thank you for watching this episode of Beyond the Scenes. Please share it. Your comments are also important, and the way that you can contribute to this project is also by sharing these stories with more people. And I'll see you in the next episode of Beyond the Scenes.